Because of the healthcare that, well, in recent years, in the last couple of years, like what it turned into because of the trans right activists. I blame them. I point the finger at them for the level of healthcare that I am receiving, for it being so dehumanizing, degrading, and dismissive to somebody like me. But then there's so much what about the other post-ops in our country? What kind of healthcare are they receiving? It's not just myself, it's just it's bigger than me. But then it's like, well, okay, well, I'm experiencing this within my province. I shouldn't have to be going through 3 months of pain with no referrals, and instead of it just being we as females experience vaginal atrophy. Well, no, I need you to believe in biological realities here. I'm not female. And then, like, what does my pronouns have to do with an interaction that is one-on-one? Or what does why do you get to redefine my sexuality? And then it's garbage. It's too politically woke. It's an institution that's captured by gender identity ideology. Thank you, Eva.
And so you're not engaged with doctors who can take you and your body seriously enough to pinpoint the problems going on as a result of what they did to your body.
Where would I access that healthcare? See, like, I'm coming from on reserve. I have to go off reserve to access healthcare. And then so many doctors are captured by the Rainbow Initiative. I wish I had written that down. It's either the Rainbow Initiative or the Trans Health Initiative. So I'm like, oh my goodness, like where do I actually see a doctor that believes in science, that believes in reality? Because the first ones that I see are my primary doctors or an ER doctor or ER nurse. Like, do I go to a bigger city? Like, which specialist do I see? Because I was referred to the gender clinic where it's just nonsense.
But is just to push back a little bit, is it not also participating in some form of genocide to submit to medical assistance in dying? Some sort of...
Oh, it's already happened. I already, with genocide, I already contributed to it by becoming sterilized.
Yeah.
So there's nothing for me to add further to, because I'm a sterilized Indian. So what happens to me, it's still gonna, even if I die a natural death, I'm still a statistic. So why not go out on my own terms that I qualify for? And yeah.
So on your own terms, as opposed to what?
Living a long, boring life with a high possibility of having the vaginas collapse with no help, no health care. So when it collapses and I go to where the gender clinic to get reconstructive surgery, like, why aren't I able to have preventative measures happen before that happens?
Okay.
Like, I'm doing everything that I can. I'm doing the maintenance required. And then, yes, something happened. I experienced depth loss, so I had to add a second dilation, which was extremely painful. But then it corrected itself one day, and I'm like, okay, I'm good for now, but where do I go next time?
What, do we know what happens when it collapses?
But a collapse is, how is a collapse gender affirming? I have so many questions I want to ask, like, health professionals, and I get to when I do the process.
Do what process?
The MAID process. So once my application has been submitted, which will likely be next week. So I'm on my phone. On the 25th. So after the 25th, my application should be submitted. I let them know, then the official process begins. It's a 90-day process with their professional, with their assessment team. So I don't know what it looks like. I don't know who the doctors are or psychiatrists. So it starts. It's just a 90-day process, and then whatever after that, then the date could be picked. I can either opt out at any given time. There's no pressure. Nobody's pressuring me. This is just me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
And then it's like so sad that, that I'm like thinking of Eva. She's witnessing one of her friends.
I'll get to talk to you.
I know.
I'll talk you out of it. So.
But like, even with my family, I'm like, this is my decision. There's like you just witness and let's make memories.
Huh.
I want to make memories.
You said long, boring life. Do you feel like you don't have anything to contribute beyond genetic reproduction? Is there?
No, I would see if I had. In Canada's woke culture, good Lord, you see how we're still disenfranchised, like as First Nations people, unless we toe, the line. And plus, I don't want to get old. Who wants to get old? I'm going to be 35 this year. And good Lord, I'm turning, like, my face is going to be 25 again. Like it has been for the last 10 years.
You don't look 35.
I know. It's because of Mad Jack. It's Mad Jack.
What's the difference between accessing MAIDs and just doing it yourself? Is there a distinction there?
One is just suicide.
Yeah.
Suicide without dignity, and the other one is with dignity. And it could be performed by nurses injecting you. So, like, you're not holding a button. You could just allow them to administer the treatment. Then you go to the land of whatever.
Huh.
See, and I believe in the afterlife, so I'm like, I want to see everything at once.
Yeah. Well, I'm confused about the word dignity. What's more dignified using a doctor rather than...
Well, because, like, you get to, like, drift off into sleep.
Yeah.
So instead of, like, harming yourself by cutting yourself or hanging yourself, like, and then having somebody find your body. Like, that's very traumatic for the people that are finding your body.
Yeah, it is.
So at least you're in a safe environment and you get to go on your terms. And I think my last breath is going to say, at least I wasn't trans.
So
Are you crying? Don't you cry.
I'm remembering something that happened 3 years ago. Just a terrible story. I don't want to say it, but...
Did it happen to you?
Oh, a 15-year-old that I know, that her parents found her. And the anniversary just was a few days ago, so...
I know, it's hard. Especially to go that way. And, like, even, well, that's what happened last summer with my cousin. She committed suicide after she was gang raped. And, like, that was intense. And then now her family, my cousins, are seeking justice for her. And the justice system's just so flawed.
It's not the liquor I'm addicted to, it's feeling brave. The feeling of not feeling the pain. I've been on and off the bottle, I put oxys out my nostrils. Believe me, you do anything to breathe before you suffocate. I couldn't stop it, staying clean was not an option. I was trying to be myself, but being me was such a problem. I just wanted to be Thomas, but Thomas was at the bottom of a hole he dug and getting comfortable inside a coffin. He locked it and swallowed the key. Caught up, forgot all his dreams. Robbed at a common, became embalmed in a toxic routine. Beer was the escape, but I got stuck escaping. Whiskey was the blanket in the coldest basement. Way before the fame, I was wasted. Freezing, doing anything I could to keep the flame lit. To anyone going through the same, heaven's got enough angels, you need to stay here. And I can't make you stay, but sometimes going ain't a choice. And every choice you make is one that you didn't avoid. Crash the whip and ditch the car. Burn a bridge, follow the stars. You'll find monsters in the dark, but nothing's worth it till it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to see things clear through your tears, but anywhere is way better than here. Fight your fear. It's not the liquor I'm addicted to, it's feeling tough. When you get bullied half your life, you feel weak, like you just ain't enough. Then you have a couple drinks and you catch a buzz and finally have the courage to defend yourself and throw a punch. And that adrenaline goes straight into your brain and blood. Addicted to the confidence, it's practically the greatest drug. Chasing dragons every night in all the latest clubs. What used to be your favorite thing somehow became a dangerous crutch. It was what it was. And that's the thing, it can happen to like any of us. I had great parents, tight friends, strong morals, nice threads, good school, good looking, good grades, time spent. Being normal only lasted for a while. One bad choice sparked a downward spiral. I've spent half my life trying to climb out of that hole. Heaven's got angels, we need you at home. And I can't make you stay, but sometimes going ain't a choice. And every choice you make is one that you didn't avoid. Crash the whip and ditch the car. Burn a bridge, follow the stars. You'll find monsters in the dark, but nothing's worth it till it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to see things clear through your tears, but anywhere is way better than here. Fight your fear. It ain't the liquor we're addicted to, it's everything else. The happiness we had, but we forget how it felt. We've been drinking with the devil cause we're going through hell. Pray to God for a little bit of help. Man, I've been there, I did those things. I drank those drinks, I took those pills, I puked in sinks. And the truth ain't pretty, listen up, this is a tough one. You get saved by your angels or become one. Crash the whip and ditch the car. Burn a bridge, follow the stars. You'll find monsters in the dark, but nothing's worth it till it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to see things clear through your tears, but anywhere is way better than here. Fight your fears.
And that's why, like with a lot of the trans kids in the footage you see, they're so callous and they're so cynical and they're so dark or they're so edgy. And it's really just like, respect my pronouns or I'll throw you in a fucking meat grinder. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, like, calm down. I'm sorry someone called you she, her, but that I didn't fucking do it. You're threatening me through the camera. Like, that's what people in Antifa do. It's the exact same thing. The kids were the target. And now so much chaos has been created by us, by the trans kids, by the detransitioners, by the radicals, by these various different groups, that we can kind of see what causes it. But I mean, they're shutting down those doctors and professors that want to talk about what's going on in the family or who want to address these types of things. So now that we've been activated, their job is to push back and censor and to shut people up so that they don't see the connections. And so long as kids aren't going in, they're not talking with their family, or they're not talking with their grandmas or their friends, or, you know, friends they have for 2 months and then they have another friend and then they cry in 5 years because every friend they ever had went away and they never stay and no one loves them. And then that disconnects. So long as that communication isn't happening back and forth, it'll get worse and worse and worse and worse until we see in the United States what we're seeing in Canada. And they're going to be like, oh, you joined Antifa 10 years ago and you're depressed. Have you considered a suicide pod? And then they'll really shut people the fuck up. So that all education, family, all this shit, we were the generation that was going to be the target, and the next generation is going to get it worse. And if we don't stop it, the next generation is going to get worse. And eventually, there's just not going to be any more generations if we let it get this bad. Like, people want to think that everything's done in the sake of compassion. Like, do you know how MAIDs works up in Canada, how the actual medical process works?
Initially, there was supposed to be review by multiple doctors. That was gotten away with. Previously, it was only supposed to be for certain medical conditions. Then that got broadened. Previously, it used to be for adults only. I don't know if they finally pushed this through, but there's talk of mature minors.
Hmm.
And there was a report a few years ago about how much MAID, that is medically assisted letting people kill themselves, could save the government.
Yeah, millions. The first year, I think it was like 8.6 million, and then it was doubling, and then it was tripling because you had less patients to take care of at that point, so you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on pills. And you're completely right in that. And I think there was pushback on the minor issue. I was listening to a woman on Jordan Peterson before we talking about it, and I think that they moved it from 12 to 17. But the actual process, they paralyze you, so you can't scream, you can't struggle, and the drugs they can't say no. If your parents try to come in and stop you, they will be arrested by the federal government and deemed terrorist. If the pill takes you 10 to 15 hours to kill you, the medicine they administer, you're drowning for 10 to 15 hours, unable to move. Your body is filling with liquid. The way she described it is you are being waterboarded to death. That's what Trudeau wants to do to kids. That's what Biden wants to do to kids. That's what these motherfuckers are planning. They want us to drown to death in our fucking sorrow.
And I talked to an advocate of assisted suicide from, I can't remember if it was Seattle or Portland. And his argument was that it wasn't going to be a slippery slope. It wouldn't become as radical as Canada.
Just never believe that argument at this point.
Right.
Like, they have one place here in Oregon, and I didn't hear about it until it came up in a fucking commercial about it, as my friend who I was dealing with, who had just had a suicide attempt, was sitting on the fucking couch. I'd never gotten up so quick to turn off the TV in my fucking life. I was like, he can't know about this. Like, that's scary as shit.
And
like,
when you can kill the people who are unwell, that destroys the incentive to make them well. So, euthanasia has basically been described as putting other people out of your misery.
Yeah. And I get there's cases where, you know, I feel like a lot of people have had their grandparents suffering, wanting to die on their last breath, and it's like, okay, like, this kind of feels like we should at this point. But those are such extreme cases, like gender dysphoria. Very, very extreme cases. Like, and it's all done in the name of compassion. Just like the Nazis, just like the Soviets. They're doing it because they love you.
I moved that book. I had a copy of The Nazi Doctors. So there's a guy who did the seminal work on Chinese brainwashing during Mao's time. He also studied the Nazi doctors and their excuses for what they did.
What were their excuses?
For euthanasia, that the people were in pain or that their suffering was impacting their family and therefore putting them out of their misery would make their family better off, and then they stopped thinking about the individual and started thinking of society. So your duty is to society, not your patient. And once people think like that, there's nothing that they won't do, so long as they can justify it on the basis of it makes society better.
And I mean, minus them saying that part publicly of it'll make your family life easier, that's what they're putting in the kids' heads. That's what they think. My family and friends would be better off without me. So they don't need to say that part. And simultaneously, the number one target of this in Canada has been Native youth. It's been the Indigenous people. And simultaneously, Yeah, so Benjamin Boyce, for anyone out there, did a fantastic interview with a girl who I hope she didn't go through with it, but at the time of the interview, she said, I'm going through with the MAID process and I want to look the doctor in the eye and say, how do you unsterilize the Indian? Because she was sterilized through the transitionary process. And this poor thing is there with her friend who's wanting to talk her out of it on the panel. And it was so fucking dark, dude. But she was listing out the stats. And I mean, what do we have simultaneously? They're lying about mass graves. So they're like, look over here. Don't look over here. We're going to make you think there's a tragedy right here that's a liberal-led tragedy, but we're not going to pay attention to this because it's a conservative-focused tragedy. And it's been working with a lot of people. And yeah, they're fucking killing the natives in front of us and saying we need to save the natives. And a lot of those kids too, the numbers as far as that, the native kids are getting trans like that too, because we have to get it into the impoverished areas. We have to get it into the native areas. We have to get it into the LGBT areas because those are the most oppressed. You know, I started watching this show yesterday called The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and there's a scene where he's going on top of the barnyard and he finally sees the concentration camp he's been let into, and they put him to work building the fucking barns. And he gets to the top of it and he looks around and there's just dozens and they're spread across and there's just Jewish people working on them. And he looks over at the guy and he's just like, there's so many. And the guy just looks at him. He's like, it's work. Do your job. And then he looks over and he sees the trucks coming through and they're just piles of bodies in the back of the trucks with the blankets back. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're saying we're just here to work. We're just here to get by. We're just here to make what's ours. We're just here to not make any trouble. Hopefully we don't wind up in the barns or the body pile. That is exactly what's happening. That's not hyperbolic and that's not an exaggeration anymore. And it scares the shit out of me.
As it should.
But I think we can beat it. But it's going to take motherfuckers running their mouths. It's going to take someone listening to this right now who's just as pissed off as you and I to go set up a free YouTube account or to free Spotify or to find a place to blog or to find a place to have their voice heard because they're coming after our freedom of speech. Use that shit as hard as you fucking can right now. And when they take it away from you, use it anyways and say, fuck you. Because we're not going into the camps. And we can't kill kids anymore. This is killing kids. Supporting the idea of trans kids is fucking murdering kids. All this LGBTQ plus shit, I'm sorry, after the T, it's fucking cut off. There is no fucking Q plus. The only other letter I'll be willing to add in there is a motherfucking D for the people we fucked over. That's the only expansion I'm going to give it, because they don't even talk about gender identity in the fucking schools anymore as being a part of gender. It's just self-identification, whatever you identify as. Okay, so what if Demon Self wants to go kill themselves tomorrow and the fucking counselor says, well, Demon Self has been feeling really bad lately and Demon Self has been having problems at home and Demon Self wants me to sign off on this form saying that Demon Self is depressed and Demon Self's going to take this fucking form to the government and get fucking axed. This is retarded. This is beyond retarded. It's fucking evil. Retarded is a fucking understatement. This is immoral. It's unethical. As far as I'm concerned, the devil is alive on Earth, and we're just all fucking bent over kissing his fucking ass.
Euthanasia has been in the news a lot lately. Countries like Canada even have a cute name for it, MAID, M-A-I-D, Medical Assistance in Dying. Euphemisms. Euphemisms are so useful to people who want to do evil. MAID, physician-assisted suicide, whatever you want to call it. It started out as something that seemed merciful to people who were dying in unbearable pain from terminal illnesses. I supported it for a long time because of that. But it's crept along now until in some countries, you could get medical assistance in dying because of mental illness, depression, autism, or personality disorders, mental problems. And it seems that all you have to do in the Netherlands now is say that you're terminally unhappy, and the state is ready to palliate you. This is a brief description of a story about a woman named Zoraya Turbeek. She's 28 years old, and she's been diagnosed with both autism, major depression, and borderline personality disorder. And this short video comes courtesy of the author of the Substack, The Free Press. That's Barry Weiss's outfit. Let's take a look.
Hello, my name is Soraya and I'm 28 years old. I live in the Netherlands and recently my euthanasia request for my mental suffering got approved.
Zoraya Turbeek is 28 and she expects to be euthanized in early May. She is one of a growing number of people across the West choosing to end their lives rather than live in pain. Pain that in many cases can be treated. Zoraya once had ambitions to become a psychiatrist, but she was never able to muster the will to finish school or start a career. She says she was hobbled by her depression and autism and borderline personality disorder. Now she was tired of living, despite, she said, being in love with her boyfriend, a 40-year-old IT programmer, and living in a nice house with their 2 cats. She recalled to me her psychiatrist telling her that they had tried everything, that, quote, "there's nothing more we can do for you. It's never going to get any better." At that point, she said she decided to die. Quote, "I was always very clear that if it doesn't get better, I can't do this anymore." In 2022, the most recent year for which there is data, Dutch officials recorded 8,720 cases of euthanasia, a 13.7% increase from 2021, when there were 7,666 cases. To put this in perspective, there were a total of 170,100 deaths in the Netherlands in 2022, meaning euthanasia cases comprised more than 5% of all deaths. Now, typically, when we think of people who are considering assisted suicide, we think of people facing terminal illness. But this new group is suffering from other syndromes, depression or anxiety exacerbated, they say, by economic uncertainty, the climate, social media, and a seemingly limitless array of fears and disappointments. I spoke to a healthcare ethics professor who served for a decade on a euthanasia review board in the Netherlands from 2005 until 2014. He told me in those years he saw, quote, "the Dutch euthanasia practice evolved from death being a last resort to death being a default option." He ultimately resigned. For my story for the Free Press, I investigate whether suicide, assisted dying, and euthanasia are a sign of human empowerment or a sign that we're in a dystopian world where core human values are disintegrating. You can read, I am 28 and I'm scheduled to die in May at thefp.com.
Okay. I'm going to make some guesses here. My guess is that with this young woman, we're in a both-and situation. I do believe she's probably suffering, but I'm not sure how genuine her claim to want to be euthanized actually is. Kevin, can you put up that picture? Yeah. Take a look at this picture on your screen. There were a number of portraits that accompanied this story in the Free Press. And I looked up a number of other pictures of Zoraya on social media, and most of them had this quality to them. Is it me, or is there something self-satisfied and smug in her facial expression, her perfectly made up and flatteringly lit portrait? I see smugness. I see almost something that looks like Duper's Delight. They're strange portraits for somebody who's allegedly intent on dying. How much of what she's going through is genuine, and how much of this is histrionic attention seeking? Because both can be going on at the same time. They often are. Here's another one. She lounges about in bed, face resting on her hand. Commentator Matt Walsh said on his show this week that Ms. Turbeek has been in the papers for years being covered because she has a do not resuscitate order and wants to make sure that everybody knows that if, no matter how young she is, if anything happens to her, she absolutely does not want to be saved or brought back to life because of her mental illness. Matt says she's even posed in a wicker coffin that she picked out. Now, I generally trust Matt Walsh. He doesn't usually lie about things, but internet search has become really screwed up because I went looking for these things, and it is, to me, impossible to find anything that's not absolutely current and algorithm favored by Google. It's getting harder and harder to find anything historical, even if historical means just a few years ago. I used to hang around with a lot of people who were advocates of physician-assisted suicide. Oh, they hate that word. They absolutely get angry when you say the word suicide. They want a euphemism. They want aid in dying, right? When people want euphemisms and they get very angry when you describe something plainly, that's an indication that they know there's something wrong with what they're doing, usually, or they want you to perceive what they're doing as something fundamentally different from what it actually is. It's a warning sign. And my support for physician-assisted suicide was probably shored up when I had a friend who was dying of cancer about 15 years ago. It was really brutal. It was liver cancer, and by the time my friend was, the day he died, he was down to about 80 pounds. You know, when people talk about being reduced to being an ambulatory skeleton, that's not a joke. It's actually a literal description. He was an animated skeleton. He was in tremendous pain. It was horrendous for him, and it was horrendous to watch. And what ended up happening was we talked with the nurses and said that we wanted to make sure that he had enough morphine on board to take care of the suffering and the pain. And even if we knew that that would hasten his death, we were fine with that. And that is, in fact, what happened. But it wasn't physician-assisted suicide. And today, actual sadists and psychopaths are at the top of these euthanasia acceptance programs. They know that there are people like me and many other people out there who have seen loved ones have agonizing deaths from cancer and who are soft-hearted about it. We want to ease people's suffering, so we end up supporting this. And unwittingly, so many normal and caring people are actually doing the work of psychopaths. And many of them are not going to wake up to this until it's too late, if at all. The same thing is going on in Canada. Here's a story from the Daily Mail. Quote, a judge in Canada has cleared the way for a 27-year-old autistic woman to be euthanized despite objections from her dad, who says she's healthy, just vulnerable due to her mental health problems. In his ruling, Justice Colin Feasby acknowledged that the doctor-assisted death would cause the father profound grief, but said the young woman's right to end her own life trumped his feelings. Alex Schadenberg, who leads the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition campaign group, said it showcased the problems with medical assistance in dying. Quote, Canada's euthanasia law was not designed to protect vulnerable people, end quote. The law is designed to protect the doctors who are willing to kill. Next quote, Canada's road to allowing euthanasia began in 2015 when its top court declared that outlawing assisted suicide deprived people of their dignity and autonomy. It gave national leaders a year to draft legislation. The resulting 2016 law legalized both euthanasia and assisted suicide for people aged 18 and over, provided they met certain conditions. They had to have a serious advanced condition, disease, or disability that was causing suffering, and their death was looming. The law was later amended to allow people who are not terminally ill to choose death, significantly broadening the number of eligible people. I remember when the physician-assisted suicide, euthanasia idea first started to take hold in conversations in my political circles in the US. I was there for it. I went to talks. I signed petitions. I don't support this any longer. I do support palliative care. I do support comfort care as aggressively as possible. There's something called the doctrine of double effect, which means, in this example, if you give enough morphine to really take care of a cancer patient's pain, that dose may also have the effect of hastening the death. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with explicit physician-assisted suicide because everything the euthanasia advocates promised, and I was there, I heard those promises. I heard them in person. Everything they promised that got me on board initially has been overridden. They promised that it would only be for impending deaths. They promised that it would only be for the terminally ill. They promised that there would be safeguards. I believed them. Millions of people believe them still. They are now lying.
It's been known for a very long time that pubescent girls in particular are sensitive to psychological epidemics. So there's a literature on that going back about 300 years. So that's how long the literature has been around. And that was Freudian hysteria, right, back in the late 1800s. And it just morphs into various forms, cutting and anorexia and bulimia. And well, now the gender transformation pathology. But I suspect that the next thing that's going to happen in Canada when the gender furor wears off, which it'll probably burn itself out in about 3 or 4 years, that would be my guess. But if the MAID people have their way, I've already seen, what would you say, romanticized death encounters distributed online. And so I think that'll be the next thing that'll confront us in Canada.
Well, here's what's really troubling about that, and nobody seems to know this. So I'd love the opportunity to talk about it because it's really concerning to me. So it's not only that it's MAID, people don't understand how MAID works. There's the track 1, the track 2, the immediate, the 90-day to end of life and all of that. And yes, they stayed the bill till 2027 to the next vote, right? So that's all great. So technically mental health's not included. But what I found out yesterday that really, really bothered me was the mechanism of the actual procedure. So there's this drug called sodium ferropental, and it's made in Italy, okay? So it's used by anesthesiologists. And the anesthesiologists that came forward with this at this testimony was, this individual had been an anesthesiologist for 25 years. He came forward with the Senate subcommittee talking about this with MAID and his concerns with it because MAID is being seen as compassionate and empathetic in care. So what he did is...
the Nazi euthanasia program started with compassion and care. Right?
I'm so glad you said that because when I got to do trigonometry, we went to the war museums. And what terrified me the most was walking through the World War II portion and seeing the same verbiage.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, definitely.
People were telling me I was going crazy. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
No, it's the same thing.
It's identical.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing.
The mentally ill, the people that are, So what's
people
really...
too distressed to live.
Thank you.
Right. And the categories keep expanding.
And that's what we're seeing, the expansion. So the sodium thiopental, which was really wild about it, is this anesthesiologist was like, it's going missing. We don't have a lot of it. We can't get it anymore all of a sudden over this past couple of years. And so he started researching it. Well, it's made in Italy, and Italy falls under the EU. And under the EU laws, you can never make a drug that is going to be used for execution. But Canada, in North America, the United States and Canada had been using it for execution in America for death penalty. So they finally caught on to that. And anesthesiologists use it as one of the first drugs pushed to put you under. But here's what's really crazy is they said, well, there's got to be more to this. So they did it's a Freedom of Information Act with the NPR, with a journalist, and they got over 300 autopsies of individuals who were executed in America. And they didn't just get the autopsy kind of overview, they were given in-depth files. And when they went through them, 85% of those bodies showed a 2 times level increase of water in the lungs. So what was happening is when this drug is pushed, it causes a drowning, and it's stated as akin to dying by waterboarding or drowning. Meaning, the reason people in Canada who are given MAID seem peaceful is because they're giving a paralytic first. So they're completely paralyzed, then this drug is administered as one of the 4, and they start drowning to death. Okay? So that means that when it's done by IV, it takes 10 to 15 minutes. That person could be literally drowning. Well, they're drowning to death, but they could be screaming if they weren't under a paralytic. They're drowning to death. We waterboarded people in Guantanamo. There's a reason we had to stop. It falls under cruel and unusual punishment. Yet we are having people like Dying with Dignity say that this falls under compassion and empathy when you're drowning people chemically to death.
You found this out at the Senate hearing?
No, I found this out yesterday when the Senate hearing was given to me and the transcripts were given to me. It was Dr. Joel B. Zivok, Associate Professor of Emory University and School of Medicine, the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority. So what's been happening is that case I was telling you about, Fraser Health is withholding the families. They can't see her autopsy. They're not allowing it. They won't give access. The police have tried to get it.
This is the same case.
This is the same case. Yeah. So they will not give it to the family. So Fraser Health is abetted, like literally lying and holding information back. So what's wild about this though is Dying with Dignity says that this is a painless death. Well, if you take MAID orally, it takes between 30 minutes to 24 hours. 24 hours of active drowning while you're under a paralytic. So the autopsies are showing that you actually drowned to death and you're waterboarded to death within your own body and you can't move or do anything about it. And that's how Dying with Dignity and the Canadian government has disguised MAID, while they're offering it to Canadian veterans instead of treatment, so they don't have to pay for their pensions, so they don't have to pay for their health care, the same way they don't have to do with
that's part of the slippery slope, isn't it? Because it makes such... Well, I saw the other day, now a month ago probably, I think it was a Japanese philosopher who said that it was incumbent on the elderly to submit themselves to government-assisted dying because of the benefits on the cost-saving side.
So in this is one of my favorite ones. I love this one because most people don't know this. So in 2021, they had a gross reduction in healthcare of $109.2 million. When they did MAID, they cut out another 22 million. So by the end of it all, in that year, the healthcare system, just from doing MAID instead of actually giving people palliative care, was 86.9 million alone. That's just 1 year without the spike. In 2021, it was 10,500. 2022, it's 13,000. And there's been a 30% increase since then. And a high rate is happening in British Columbia. High cost of living, nowhere to live, no housing, and no one to look after these people because the younger individuals just don't have the finances because they can't even buy their own home. So how could they then put somebody in care that costs $8,000 to $10,000 a month when you can't even afford to live in a 2-bedroom basement apartment? And furthermore, there's no housing because we're taking every single person into this country and acting as if Canadians are second citizens, because that's what's happening. Canada is falling. We have no identity. We're killing our own citizens. And people act like people like me are going crazy. I'm not going crazy. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. We are killing innocent people, and children are on they are on the chopping block. If we didn't stop that bill by the 17th, children down to the age of 12 with parent consent, a 17-year-old could walk into a hospital and say, I want to die, by MAID, and guess what? If you try to stop it as a parent, you will be arrested. I'm not sure morally where we have either lost our minds, lost the plot, been paid off, or just decided that we no longer care about the generation after us. But something is going really wrong when I have group homes calling me or messaging me on Instagram going, Kelsey, I'm hearing of huge swaths of these groups sitting down going, convincing each other to die, that they're going to walk in together. Because Simons has made it seem like it's bubbles on a beach in a cave.
Yeah. No, that's the romanticization that I was talking about.
But what are we saying to the youth? That there's no future, there's no goals, you can't buy a home, there's nowhere to live, you can't don't try to get a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
Don't bother. So honestly, what do they have to look forward to? But I'm telling you right now, this has never been talked about. This part here where it is drowning to death, where you're waterboarding to death, no one, not one person has said this. I have never heard this.
And you just found out about this?
Yesterday. And I found out because there was an event in South Surrey that my girlfriend I was telling you about, her mother was taken. She was at, and she goes, Kelsey, one of the Delta hospice centers is being shut down because they refused to do MAID. So it wasn't necessarily Rebel, but it was Sheila and Keon. They made this documentary to talk to people like us going, they're saying that they need government right to do this, but hey, they're already doing it and they've been doing it. And we have audio recordings of veterans. We have the Minister of Veterans Affairs lying to Mercedes Stephenson on the West Block saying it was one veteran, when we have multiple veterans, multiple case managers, audio recordings, and written testimonies. So are we just okay with everyone lying now? Is that where we're at? We accept lies as truth and there's no moral qualms with that? Because if anybody is a God-fearing individual right now, the whole idea is, I don't really care what you believe in. All I ask is stop lying. Be honest. If you want to kill people to save money, say it. That's it. Just say what you mean, but stop dancing around like you're doing this out of empathy. You are killing vulnerable people to save money to send to another country that bought you out in 2013? And that's a CSIS document. We've sold our country, we've sold our people, and we've told our youth that we should just die because there's nothing to live for in this country. How am I supposed to combat that? I'm one voice up there. Thank God you showed up. If you didn't show up, none of us, people like me, would have no footsteps to walk and we would have no path carved out for us. You're the first in the door. You took the heat. You're like the breacher. You're the guy that shows up and goes, I'm going to kick that door in and whatever's going to come is I'm just going to take it because I have to. You had a moral obligation because if you didn't do it, the rest of us would have nowhere to go and nowhere to turn if you didn't show up. So I'm so grateful to be here and I'm so grateful that you gave us the space because I don't know what else to do because I can't scream any louder. I'm loud, but I don't know what else to do anymore. We deserve better, and so do our kids, and so do our citizens. We don't deserve this. Canada doesn't deserve. No one deserves to be waterboarded to death except for the people that deserve to be waterboarded to death. And there are people that deserve to be waterboarded to death. And I can tell you right now that I've seen that done to someone. You don't wish that on anyone. You don't wish that on anyone. It would have been easier. It's easier to put bricks around my feet and go jump in the ocean than it is to die by MAID. That is a terrifying way to die.